Today I'm going to be talking about something completely different. I know we were talking about astrology, the asteroids, but I've been inspired to make a video about something very, very esoteric. I mean, so is astrology, but these are different things, okay? I am on the Rudolf Steiner archive. This man, he is quite amazing. Well, first, I guess I should go into a little description about him first, right? So first, let me just get, I just want to get a little description about him. So, Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian occultist, a social reformer, an architect, an esotericist, and he claimed clairvoyant. Steiner gained initial recognition at the end of the 19th century as a literary critic and published works including The Philosophy of Freedom. At the beginning of the 20th century, he founded an esoteric spiritual movement, Anthroposophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy and theosophy. His teachings are influenced by Christian Gnosticism, and many of his ideas are pseudoscientific. So, he was also prone to pseudo-history. And in the first, more philosophically oriented phase of this movement, Steiner attempted to find a synthesis between science and spirituality. His philosophical work of these years, which he termed spiritual science, sought to apply what he saw as the clarity of thinking characteristic of Western philosophy to spiritual questions, differentiating this approach from what he considered to be vaguer approaches to mysticism. In a second phase, beginning around 1907, he began working collaboratively in a variety of artistic media, including drama, dance, and architecture, culminating in the building of Theanum, a cultural center to house all the arts. So, overall, this man, main thing, synthesis between science and spirituality. Let's go back to the one I want to really talk about. That kind of blows my mind, and I'm still very new to this topic, okay? It's still very new to me. So as I learn, you guys can learn with me. If you have any points you'd like to offer or add to it, please do. I love hearing your own takes on things. And if you've looked into it yourself, I love hearing feedback about it. But the one I'm going to talk about is the Ahriman Deception. And this was, says here, October 27th, 1919. In addressing a public audience today on the most important question of our time, it makes a great difference if one speaks from a knowledge of the deeper forces of world historical evolution, that is, from initiation science, or if one speaks without such knowledge. It is relatively easy to speak about modern questions if one relies upon data of external knowledge, which are considered scientific, practical, and so on. It is, however, extraordinarily difficult to speak about these questions from the standpoint of initiation science, from which indeed everything is derived, with which we have to deal at such gatherings as ours today. For he who speaks from that standpoint about problems of the time knows that he is opposed not only by the casual, subjective opinions of those to whom he speaks. He knows, too, that a great part of mankind today is already under the control, from one side or another, of Ahrimanic forces of a cosmic nature which are growing stronger and stronger. To explain what I mean by this, I must give you a kind of historical survey of a fairly long period of human history. From various statements which have been made here and which you will also find in some of my lecture courses, you know that we have to place the beginning of our modern age in the middle of the 15th century. We have always called this period, of which we are really only at the beginning, the fifth post-Atlantean epoch. It has replaced the Greco-Latin epoch, which we reckon from the middle of the 8th century BC to the middle of the 15th century. And further back still, we have the Egyptian Chaldean epoch. I have merely indicated this so that you may remember where, in human evolution as a whole, we place the epoch in which we feel ourselves standing as modern men. Now you know that at the close of the first third of the Greco-Latin epoch, the mystery of Golgotha took place. And from many different aspects, we have characterized what really came about for human evolution through the mystery of Golgotha. In fact, for the whole evolution of the earth. Today, into this broad historical survey, we will place various things concerning mankind which are connected with this mystery. Hold on, I need to get repositioned. Okay, I think I'm in a more comfortable position now. Okay, my nose is being a bitch too. The seasonal changes are getting to me. Okay, so now we're on, okay, right here. With this in view, let us glance back into far earlier times. Let us say into the ages about the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC. You are aware how little is said in external historical tradition about this early evolution of the human race on Earth. You know, too, how external documents point over to Asia, to the Orient. From many anthroposophical sources, you will know that the further we go back in mankind's evolution, the more we find a different constitution of the human soul, and something like an ancient original wisdom underlying the whole evolution of humanity. You know further that certain traditions of an ancient wisdom of mankind were preserved in close secret circles right into the 19th century. Yep. They have even been preserved into our own time, but not, for the most part, at all faithfully. When a man of today learns to know something of this original wisdom, he is astounded at the depths of the realities to which it points. Yet in the course of the studies we have been pursuing for many years, it has been shown that this widespread wisdom teaching of ancient times must always be contrasted with the understanding of life and the world that was possessed by the old Hebrew people and bore a completely different character. With a certain justice, the widespread original wisdom is described as the heathen pagan element, and to this is opposed the Hebrew Jewish element. From external traditions and literature, you are aware how the Christian element then arose out of the Jewish. How interesting is that? Like, that's, yeah, when you really think about it, that's pretty insane, right? Because they're so different. Like, but you can see how that came about. And I don't like to, I'm just basing it off of what I get from this. It's like, there's symbolism in it. Even to the story of Jesus, like, Jesus was a Jew, right? But his own people don't believe in him. They don't believe that he existed. It is the same thing as when he was persecuted and he was killed and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so crazy to me because Christianity it arose out of Judaism. I mean, from this explanation here, it confirms a little bit more as to what I was already kind of processing within my own mind. I would like to hear other perspectives. I'm not trying to say I'm right about these things, but just wanted to put that out there. You can already gather from these external facts something that I beg you to bear in mind, namely, that it was essential in humanity's evolution to confront the ancient heathen element and its wisdom with the Jewish element out of which Christianity evolved partially at all events. The primeval heathen or pagan wisdom in its totality was not destined to have the sole influence on the further evolution of mankind. Yeah. And now the question must arise, why had the ancient pagan wisdom, which is in many respects so wonderful, to experience a new form, a transformation through Judaism, and Christianity? This question inevitably arises. The answer is supplied for initiation wisdom only through a very, very weighty fact, through an event which took place far over in Asia at the beginning of the third millennium of the pre-Christian era. Clairvoyant vision finds, in looking back, that an incarnation of a supersensible being in a human being had taken place there. Just as the event of Golgotha, an incarnation of the supersensible Christ being, had taken place in the man Jesus of Nazareth, the incarnation that took place at the beginning of the third millennium BC is extraordinarily difficult to follow up, even with the science of seership, of initiation. Interesting. Just as in the event. Wow. Huh. Yeah. These storylines match, right? I'm just getting these insights as we go, so just bear with me. It gave humanity something of immense brilliance, having an incisive effect. What it gave to humanity, in fact, was the primeval wisdom. Viewed externally, one can say that it was a wisdom penetrating deep into reality, cold, based purely on ideas, permeated little by feeling. The actual inner nature of this wisdom can be judged only by going back to that incarnation which took place over in Asia at the beginning of the third pre-Christian millennium. It is revealed to the retrospective clairvoyant gaze that this was an actual human incarnation of the Luciferic power. This is fascinating. Okay. And this incarnation of Lucifer in humanity, because remember, they bring it up. They bring up, that's when it, yeah, that's like, they have the story of Lucifer, right? And Christ going opposing. These are, I'll continue. Okay. And this incarnation of Lucifer in humanity, which in a certain way has been achieved, was the origin of the widely extended ancient wisdom based on the third post-Atlantean civilization. There was still an after effect, even in Grecian times. I think it's Grecian times, of the widespread cultural impulse that was derived from this Asiatic, Luciferic human being. I'm going to have a lot of words I have to look up. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not some... Okay. Luciferic wisdom was of the utmost benefit to man in that epoch of evolution. brilliant in a certain way, graduated according to the different peoples and races among which it was spread. It was plainly recognizable throughout the whole of Asia. Then in the Egyptian civilization, the Babylonian civilization, and even in the culture of Greece. All that was possible to the humanity of that time in thought, in the realm of poetry, in deeds, was in a certain way determined through the entry of this Luciferic impulse into human civilization. Yes. So, it's to say that we need these opposing forces. We need the positive and the negative. You can't have one without the other. So there's different ages. It's like the Luciferian age was like where art was birthed, but then there was also a lot of alcohol and a lot of drinking. There's the dark sides of it, but then there's a lot of beautiful things that derive from it, which you could not, I mean, these sculptures that they made, you know, and all these beautiful poetic things and stories that came about, inspirations are by going against the structure, right? To expand, birthing creativity, so that is kind of like that's kind of what I'm getting here. It would, of course, be extraordinarily Philistine to wish to say that was an incarnation of Lucifer, hence we must flee from it. Okay, hold on a second. I know what Philistine means now. Just wanted to look it up. Such Philistinism could make one also flee from the beauty and greatness that has come to mankind from this Luciferic stream. See, okay, yes, for the fruits of Greek culture, with all their beauty, proceeded, as already said, from this stream of evolution. The whole of Gnostic thought existing at the time of the mystery of Golgotha and impressive wisdom shedding light deep into cosmic realities. This whole Gnostic knowledge was inspired by the impulse coming from Luciferic forces. One must not say that Gnostic thought is therefore false. One is merely characterizing it by saying that it is permeated by Luciferic forces. Then considerably more than 2,000 years after the Luciferic incarnation came the mystery of Golgotha. It may be said that the men among whom the impulse of this mystery spread were still fully imbued in their thinking and feeling with what had come from the impulse of Lucifer, and now there entered into the evolution of civilized humanity an entirely different impulse, the impulse proceeding from the Christ. We have often spoken of what this Christ impulse signifies within civilized humanity. The Christ impulse, I will only touch on this today, was taken up by the hearts and minds that I have just characterized. One might say that it shone into all the best that came to man from Lucifer. And in the first Christian centuries, men understood the Christ through what they had received from Lucifer. These things must be faced without prejudice. Otherwise, it is not really possible to understand the particular way in which the Christ impulse was received in the first centuries of our era. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. It's just very a deep spiritual awareness of how these energies play together, how they integrate, how they take turns in building us through our evolution in the soul. As the Luciferic impulse began to fade more and more, men were also increasingly unable to absorb the Christ impulse in the right way. Consider how much has become materialistic in the course of modern times. But if you ask yourself what in particular has become materialistic, you must receive the answer. A great part of modern Christian theology. For it is simply the starkest materialism in which a great part of modern Christian theology succumbs when it no longer sees the Christ in the man Jesus of Nazareth. It sees only the human being, the simple man of Nazareth, the man whom one can understand if one will only raise oneself a little to some sort of higher understanding. The more the man Jesus of Nazareth could be regarded as an ordinary human being, one belonging to the ranks of other noted human personalities, the better it is pleased a certain materialistic trend of modern theology. Of the supersensible element of the event of Golgotha, modern theology is willing to recognize little, very little. The impulses entering humanity from a luciferic source sank down gradually into the soul. On the other hand, however, another impulse, which we call the Ahrimanic, is growing stronger and stronger in modern times. It will become increasingly strong in the near future and on into future ages. The Ahrimanic impulse proceeds from a supersensible being different from the being of Christ or of Lucifer. Equally with supersensible, one can say subsensible, but that is not the point here. The influence of this being becomes especially powerful in the fifth post-Atlantean epoch. If we look at the confused conditions of recent years, we shall find that men have brought to such chaotic conditions mainly through the Ahrimanic powers. Just as there was an incarnation of Lucifer at the beginning of the third pre-Christian millennium, as there was the Christ incarnation at the time of the mystery of Golgotha, so there will be a Western incarnation of the Ahriman, being some little time after our present earthly existence. In fact, in the third post-Christian millennium, to form a right conception of the historical evolution of mankind during approximately 6,000 years, one must grasp that at the one pole stands a Luciferic incarnation. In the center, the incarnation of Christ, and at the other pole, the Ahrimanic incarnation. Lucifer is the power that stirs up in man all fanatical, all falsely mystical forces, all that physiologically tends to bring the blood into disorder and so lift man above and outside himself. Ahriman is the power that makes man dry, prosaic, Philistine, that ossifies him, calcifies, and brings him to the superstition of materialism. And the true nature and being of man is essentially the effort to hold the balance between the powers of Lucifer and Ahriman. The Christ impulse helps present humanity to establish this equilibrium. That's actually really deep. And it almost kind of makes me like a little, like, because it's so deep. That's such a deep thing. It's for me. Thus, these poles, the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic, are continuously present in man. Viewed historically, we find that the Luciferic preponderated in certain times or certain currents of cultural developmental times of the pre-Christian age and continued into the first centuries of our era. On the other hand, the Ahrimanic influence has been at work since the middle of the 15th century and will increase in strength until an actual incarnation of Ahriman takes place among Western humanity. Now it is characteristic of such things that they are prepared long in advance. Ahrimanic powers prepare the evolution of mankind in such a way that it can fall a prey to Ahriman when he appears in human form within Western civilization, hardly then to be called civilization in our sense. As once Lucifer appeared in human form in China. Oh, wait a minute. Once Christ appeared in human form in Asia Minor. It is of no avail to give oneself illusions today about these things. Ahriman will appear in human form. The only question is how he will find humanity prepared. Interesting. Will his preparations have secured for him as followers the whole of mankind that today calls itself civilized, or will he find a humanity that can offer resistance? It does not help at all to give oneself up to illusions. People nowadays flee the truth, and one cannot give it to them in an unvarnished form because they would ridicule it and scoff and jeer. Very true. But if one gives it to them through the threefold social organism, as one now tries to do, then they will not have it either. Not the majority at any rate. Hold on. So the threefold social organism. Social threefolding is a society theory which originated in the early 20th century from the work of Rudolf Steiner. Of central importance is a distinction made between three spheres of society: political, economic, and cultural. So that makes sense for sure. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Makes more and more sense. The fact that people reject these things is just one of the means which the Ahrimanic powers can use, in which will give Ahriman the greatest possible following when he appears in human form on Earth. This disregard of the weightiest truths is precisely what will build Ahriman the best bridge to the success of his incarnation, and nothing will help us to find the right position in regard to the part played by Ahriman in human evolution except an unprejudiced study of the forces through which Ahriman's influence works, as well as learning to know the forces through which mankind can arm itself against being tempted and led astray. For this reason, we will cast a brief glance today at various things which would foster support of Ahriman, in which Ahrimanic powers, working out of supersensible worlds through human minds down here, will particularly employ in order to make his following as numerous as possible. Okay, so let's see. So now, in order for his incarnation to take the most profitable form, it is of the utmost interest to Ahriman that people should perfect themselves in all illusory modern science, but without knowing that it is illusion. So perfect themselves through science that is an illusion, but they don't know it's an illusion. It's like plastic surgery, Botox, all these things. This is illusions, filters. Ahriman has the greatest possible interest in instructing men in mathematics, but not in instructing them that mathematical mechanistic concepts of the universe are merely illusions. He is intensely interested in bringing men chemistry, physics, biology, and so on as they are presented today in other remarkable effects, but he is interested in making men believe that these are absolute truths, not that they are only points of view, like photographs from one side. So it's to make us more calcified, more egotistic, set in our ways. I know everything type of mentality, to conceal from mankind that in modern intellectual rationalistic science, with its supplement of a superstitious empiricism, one is dealing with a great illusion, a deception, that men should not recognize this is of the greatest possible interest to Ahriman. It would be a triumphant experience for him if the scientific superstition which grips all circles today and by which men even want to organize their social science, should prevail into the third millennium, he would have the greatest success if he could then come as a human being into Western civilization and find the scientific superstition. Do not draw false conclusions from what I have just said. It would be a false conclusion to avoid the science of the day. That is the very falsest conclusion which could be drawn. We must get to know science. We should get an exact knowledge of all that comes from this direction, but with full consciousness that we are receiving an illusory aspect, an illusion necessary for our education as men. We do not safeguard ourselves against Ahriman by avoiding modern science, but by learning to know its character. It's like you have to, in a way, you learn how do you overcome your enemy. You learn everything about them. In order to know your enemy, you have to know how your enemy might think. But then at the same time, how do you prevent yourself from falling and becoming your enemy? See? And that is like, it's mind-blowing, because when he explains Lucifer on one pole, Ahriman on the other, Christ impulse, consciousness is in the middle. He's trying, it's this force that's trying to balance it out to make you not lose yourself. All the different aspects of us. This is so fascinating. And I remember learning about a little bit, hearing about it, but I mean, reading this is on a whole nother level of realization, you know. I think I've gone far past the recording, so I think I should continue this another time. Let me know what you think. Well, I'm going to read this one little thing, actually, before we end this. So, where did I? Okay. For modern science gives us an external illusion of the universe. We need this illusion. Do not imagine that we do not need it. We must only fill it in from quite another side with actual reality gained through spiritual research. We must rise from the illusory character to the true reality. You will find reference in many of my lecture courses to what I'm telling you today, but to lift it all to the sphere where one can see its real value. You cannot wish to get rid of the rainbow because you know it to be an illusion of light and color. You will not understand it if you do not realize its illusory character. But it is just the same with all that modern science gives you for your imagination of the universe. It gives only illusions, and that must be recognized. It is by educating oneself through these illusions that one arrives at the reality. This then represents one of the means used by Ahriman to make his incarnation as effective as possible, this keeping of man back in scientific superstition. So it's the second means that he employs is to stir up all the emotions that split men up into small groups that mutually attack one another. You need only look at all the conflicting parties that exist today, and if you are unprejudiced, you will recognize that the explanation is not to be found merely in human nature. If men honestly try to explain this so-called world war through human disharmonies, they will realize that with what they find in physical humanity, they cannot explain it. It is precisely here that supersensible powers, Ahrimanic powers, have been at work. These Ahrimanic powers are working. In fact, wherever disharmonies arise between groups of men, now the question arises, on what foundation is most of what we are considering based? Wow. I'll have to finish this another time, but this is very interesting to me. Well, I need to keep going because I'm still, okay. Let us proceed from a very characteristic example. The modern proletariat has had its Karl Marx. Observe closely how the doctrines of Karl Marx have been spread among the proletariat, with Marxist literature reaching practically immeasurable proportions. You will find all the methods of our present-day science used in the books. Everything is strictly proved, so strictly proved that many people of whom one would never have supposed it have fallen victim to Marxism. what was the actual destiny of Marxism? It spread at first, as you know, among the proletariat and was firmly rejected by university science. Today, there are already a number of university scientists who have veered round to acknowledging Marxist logic. They adhere to it because its literature has proved that its conclusions are in excellent accord, that from the standpoint of modern science, Marxism can be quite neatly proved. Middle-class circles have unfortunately had no Karl Marx, who could have proved the opposite for them. For just as one can prove the ideological character of right, morality, and so forth, the theory of surplus value and materialistic historical research from the Marxist standpoint, so is it possible to prove their exact opposite. Oh, wow. Interesting. Whence does this come? It comes from the fact that present human thinking, the present intellect, lies in a stratum of being where it does not reach down to realities. One can therefore prove something quite strictly and also prove its opposite. It is possible today to prove spiritualism on one hand and materialism on the other. So I would say spiritualism, the mystics, the empaths, these esoteric things, and we talk about the New Age community, which I have my thoughts on that, because it turns into marketing. This is materialism. Oh, buying a whole bunch of crystals. Trust me, I am not immune to falling prey to these things. I think that it's interesting because I can see that symbolically within the way that I see how the world is changing through my eyes, of course, is that spotting that where it loses the authenticity in a way. And it becomes more like it's hard to really find and be able to teach the roots of it without it becoming just a trend, because it's just material. It's just something that is in the nows of what's popular. Popularity is created through marketing. So, yeah, I should probably stop this. I just find it very fascinating. It really is. It really gets me thinking about a lot of stuff. Truly inspirational, Interesting stuff. Peace out.